Welcome to True Echo, where real emotion meets storytelling that echoes through your soul. Today's story isn't just about standing up to bullies, it's about what happens when power built on fear meets a force even greater, self-control. Based on a shocking school incident gone viral, this is a tale of justice, redemption, and what it truly means to be strong. This is not just fiction. It feels real because it speaks to something we all recognize: the fight for dignity in a world that often tests it. Stay with us to the end because the twist in this story will leave you speechless. Marcus Johnson stood still before the old ivy-covered gates of Brooklyn High, his fingers tightening around the straps of his backpack. A cold breeze swept across the campus, carrying with it a sharp reminder: this wasn't home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The brick walls loomed like red giants, guarding secrets and rules that Marcus hadn't learned yet, but somehow he already knew one thing. He didn't belong. At least, not in the way others here already did. He adjusted his hoodie and stepped through the gates, merging into the steady stream of students flooding the hallways. Marcus was tall, lean, and carried himself with a stillness that almost seemed rehearsed. He wasn't new to being the new kid. This was his fourth school in 5 years. But he didn't come to Brooklyn High looking for a fresh start or to make friends. He came with one quiet hope: to make it through senior year without being noticed. But the silence he wore like armor made him stand out more than he intended. The moment he entered the front hallway, conversations dimmed. A few students glanced up from their phones and turned to stare. Others whispered behind cupped hands. He heard someone laugh and say, "Who's that? Looks like he walked out of a fight club." Marcus kept his head down. He knew how this played out, he'd seen it too many times. What Marcus didn't know yet was that Austin Mitchell had already noticed him. And in this school, if Austin noticed you, it was either because he liked you, or because he didn't. Austin Mitchell was the kind of kid who never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. Wealthy, striking, and confident to the point of arrogance, he carried the kind of influence that made teachers tolerate his cruelty and students emulate his style. His blonde hair always lay slicked back like he belonged in an ad for expensive cologne, and his blue eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone his age. To Austin, Marcus wasn't just a new face. He was a threat. A disruption to the unspoken social order Austin had ruled since freshman year. It started small. A shoulder bump in the hallway that felt more like a shove. A textbook mysteriously missing from Marcus' locker. A quiet snicker when Marcus was called on in class. But the real attack was silence, the kind that spreads through a school like a cold virus. Whispers in the cafeteria. A chair pulled away before Marcus could sit. Notes left on his locker: "Chicago thug, watch your back, go home." Marcus took it all. He didn't respond. He didn't retaliate. He didn't even flinch. But silence has a sound, and for someone like Austin it was deafening. Austin thrived on reaction. That was how he measured control, by how deeply he could burrow under someone's skin. So when Marcus didn't give him the satisfaction of anger, fear, or even discomfort, Austin's smug confidence twisted into something colder. Something meaner. One afternoon, Marcus opened his locker to find a note scrawled in black marker: "You're not wanted here." No name. No signature. But he didn't need one. He already knew who it was. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in their small Brooklyn apartment. The streetlight outside flickered on and off, casting shadows on the wall like ghosts trying to break through. His father, James Johnson, walked in quietly, holding a cup of tea. "You're quiet," James said. Marcus didn't answer at first. Then he nodded slowly. "It's happening again." James sat beside him, eyes thoughtful. "You want to talk about it?" Marcus hesitated. "Same story. New school. They see my skin before they see me. One guy, Austin, he runs the place. He's coming for me." James sipped his tea, silent for a moment. Then he spoke with a calm that only age and pain could teach. "You remember what I told you?" "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "Real strength is the ability to control yourself, even when the world tries to control you." James nodded. "Don't lose that. No matter what." Marcus looked down at his hands. They were strong hands, sculpted from years of training in his father's boxing gym back in Chicago. But the real muscle, the one he struggled to keep trained, was the one between his ears. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. Not much. He kept hearing their laughter. The whispers. The challenge in Austin's cold eyes. But more than that, he heard his father's voice, steady as ever. The next morning, he walked into school with the same quiet steps. But there was something different in the way he moved. Not fear. Not anger. Just control. Like a storm waiting to choose whether to rain or pass over in silence. By lunchtime, the whispers had grown louder. Word had spread that Austin had planned something. Marcus didn't know what, but he had a feeling it was coming. He sat at the edge of the cafeteria alone, eating slowly, methodically. His fingers wrapped around the plastic fork like it was a lever for holding his composure. And then, just like a scripted drama, Austin showed up. With his tray in hand, he walked by Marcus' table, paused, and accidentally spilled his juice across Marcus's tray, soaking his food in a wave of red stickiness. "Oh," Austin said loudly for everyone to hear. "Didn't see you there, Chicago?" Laughter rippled around them. Marcus didn't move. He didn't blink. Slowly he picked up his tray, walked to the trash and dumped it. Then he returned to his table and wiped it clean, piece by piece, without looking at anyone. He didn't say a word. And in that moment, in the silence that followed, Marcus Johnson became something more than just the new kid. He became the first person who ever made Austin Mitchell nervous. After the cafeteria incident, something subtle shifted in the air at Brooklyn High. It wasn't loud. It wasn't immediate. But it was real. The laughter that followed Marcus's humiliation had faded too quickly. Even the most devoted of Austin's followers felt a strange discomfort creep in. Maybe it was the way Marcus didn't flinch. Or maybe it was how he held himself, with a quiet pride that refused to be broken. But whatever it was, for the first time in years, Austin Mitchell wasn't the one who owned the silence. He sat at his usual table, surrounded by Brian, Cole, and a couple of hangers-on from the football team. The boys talked loudly, throwing around jokes and smirks, but Austin wasn't listening. He was staring across the room at Marcus, who had returned to his spot with a fresh tray of food, now calmly eating as if nothing had happened. His shoulders were square. His eyes focused. His breathing steady. Like a boxer waiting for the bell. Austin's jaw tightened. "He's messing with me," he muttered under his breath. Brian leaned in. "You sure?" "He hasn't said a word." "That's the point," Austin snapped. "That silence, it's not normal. It's defiance." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Maybe he's just trying not to get kicked out." Austin didn't answer. His pride, once untouchable, now felt paper-thin. And Marcus hadn't even touched him. That was the most infuriating part. He hadn't said a word, thrown a punch, or raised his voice, but somehow he was winning. The school could feel it even if they didn't know how to explain it. By the next day, Austin made his next move. The rumor campaign began. It started in the locker room. Brian spread a story about Marcus getting expelled from his old school for putting a kid in the hospital. "You didn't hear?" Brian told a few of the freshmen like he was passing along secret classified intel. "Yeah. Kid almost died." Marcus didn't even blink. You can't trust someone like that. The story mutated by lunchtime. Now Marcus had seriously injured 2 kids, and got off the hook because his dad used to be a pro fighter. By the end of the day, some were whispering that Marcus was on probation, and the only reason he was allowed at Brooklyn High was because the school needed diversity points. Marcus heard every version of the lie. In the hallway. In the locker room. Even one from a teacher who nervously avoided his gaze. But he said nothing. He kept his movements controlled. He kept his eyes forward. But inside, his past clawed its way toward the surface like a nightmare trying to wake up. The fight in Chicago, Tyler Henderson, his bloodied knuckles, and that horrible moment when he saw Tyler's eyes roll back. It all came flooding back in whispers and gossip that felt too close to the truth. He couldn't afford to react. Not here. Not again. That night, Marcus sat on the floor of his room, legs crossed, palms open on his knees, just like his father had taught him when he was 12. Focus your breath. Focus your center. You are more than what they call you. But the pressure was building. The next morning, Marcus walked into school and immediately noticed something taped to his locker. A piece of paper, large and bold. "If you're not a coward, meet me at the field after school." Signed, Austin Mitchell. He stood in front of the note for a long time. Long enough for a small crowd to gather. Whispers started again. "You think he'll go?" "Bet he's gonna run." "Nah, he's gonna fight." "I heard he's a monster." "Austin's gonna wreck him." Marcus didn't react. He tore the note down, folded it, and put it in his pocket. Then, without looking at anyone, he walked. Straight down the main hallway. Straight toward Austin. The crowd parted like water, phones already out, recording. Austin leaned casually against the locker, arms crossed, like he was expecting a fan to walk up for an autograph. When he saw Marcus approaching, he straightened, his smirk returning. But even he didn't expect what came next. Marcus stopped directly in front of him, looked him in the eyes, and said calmly but clearly, "I'll be there." And that was it. No threats. No aggression. Just a promise. Austin blinked. For the briefest moment, his smirk faltered. Then he scoffed, nodded, and turned to his crew. "Looks like we're giving the school a show." All day, whispers spread like fire. Everyone knew about the challenge. Teachers pretended not to hear. Administrators stayed silent. But the students? They were counting down the minutes. By the final bell, the sports field was no longer just a place for track meets. It was an arena. Austin stood with Zach, his older brother, and Luke, the troublemaker from the senior class who loved chaos more than loyalty. Together, they formed the wall Marcus would have to break through. Austin wore his trademark leather jacket and a grin he had perfected over the years. The grin that said, "I already won." Zach, broad and stone-faced, cracked his knuckles. Luke spit into the grass and grinned like a predator. But when Marcus walked onto the field, he wasn't what they expected. He didn't come with swagger. He didn't look afraid. He came walking slow, steady. His fists were unclenched. His face unreadable. He stopped 10 feet from Austin and simply said, "I'm here." The crowd hushed. Austin laughed once. "You should have stayed home." He motioned toward Zach and Luke. And just like that, the first real move was made. Zach charged. Marcus sidestepped like he was stepping over a puddle. One move. Zach went flying. Before Luke could process what happened, Marcus spun, deflected his punch, and pinned him with a joint lock so clean it could have been a demo reel. Marcus let go just before pain became damage. The crowd gasped. Austin froze. Marcus stood tall and still. He looked at Austin. "I didn't come to fight. But I won't run. Not anymore." The words hit harder than a punch. Not just for Austin but for everyone watching. For the first time in Brooklyn High history, the loudest voice had nothing to say. And the quietest voice finally spoke. Austin Mitchell stood paralyzed, his feet rooted to the ground, his lips slightly parted like he wanted to say something, anything, but no sound came. Around him, the crowd that had come for entertainment stood eerily silent. Zach groaned from the grass, clutching his shoulder, while Luke stared up at Marcus in stunned disbelief. What just happened wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not like this. And yet, there was Marcus, calm, unshaken, his breathing steady as though he had just walked down the hall to class. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He had barely even moved. But in that stillness he had shifted something massive. The balance of power. The illusion of control. The lie that Austin had told himself and everyone else for years. That fear meant respect and domination meant power. Marcus slowly turned toward Austin, locking eyes with him. "I didn't come to fight," he repeated. "But you pushed me here. And now everyone knows the truth." Austin's fists clenched. "Truth?" he spat. "You think this proves anything? You think this little performance makes you better than me?" Marcus didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "But it proves I'm not afraid of you. And that scares you more than anything." That was when Austin snapped. With a roar of frustration, he lunged, reckless, teeth gritted, his pride in pieces. But Marcus had trained for this. Not just in the gym, not just with his father, but in life. In control. He saw it in slow motion, the rage, the desperation, the breaking point. Marcus didn't dodge out of fear. He moved with precision, catching Austin's wrist mid-swing and guiding him forward with a redirecting motion. The force of Austin's own momentum carried him into the dirt. Dust rose and a slow arc gasps echoed across the field. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't tower over him or mock him. He simply stood back and said the words that would be remembered long after the crowd had gone home. "Power built on fear will always fall. You can't lead by breaking people." Austin lay still, his chest heaving not from pain, but from something worse. Shame. Zach stood now, watching everything unfold with a strange look in his eyes. Not rage, not defensiveness. Just quiet recognition. Luke rubbed his shoulder, avoiding eye contact altogether. And then the real twist happened, not one anyone expected. Marcus walked over to Austin, bent slightly, and extended his hand. Not as a threat, but as an offering. A lifeline. Austin stared at the hand like it was a foreign object. Around them, whispers erupted, some shocked, some moved. But Marcus didn't care. He knew what it meant to be humiliated. He knew what it felt like to lose everything in one day. He also knew what his father always told him. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is forgive someone who doesn't deserve it yet. Austin didn't take the hand. Not at first. He looked at it, at Marcus, at the eyes staring from all sides. Then finally, slowly, he reached out and let Marcus help him to his feet. Marcus said nothing. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. Then turned and walked away. Behind him, Austin stood still, his fists unclenched for the first time in days. He felt like he couldn't breathe. But for the first time in his life he also felt something heavier than pride: clarity. That night, Marcus sat on the fire escape of their apartment building, the city's hum low and steady in the background. He hadn't told his father everything yet, but he would. He held the note Austin had taped to his locker earlier, the one challenging him to the field. He unfolded it again, the ink slightly smeared now from the sweat of his pocket. He read it once more, then crumpled it, not in anger but like someone letting go of a weight he no longer needed to carry. He didn't know what Monday would bring. Whether Austin would return to his old ways or retreat into silence. But that didn't matter. Because Marcus hadn't won by fighting. He had won by choosing not to. The next morning the hallway buzzed, but not in the same way. When Marcus entered, students actually moved aside, not out of fear but respect. He wasn't met with smirks or whispers anymore. Some nodded. A few smiled. And when he passed Austin at his old hangout spot near the vending machines, something even more unexpected happened. Austin nodded at him. Not sarcastically. Not with spite. Just acknowledgement. Marcus nodded back. It wasn't a truce. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a beginning. By Tuesday morning, Brooklyn High didn't feel quite the same. The halls still buzzed with voices, lockers still slammed shut, and the cafeteria still reeked of overcooked pizza and mystery meat. But beneath all that, there was a noticeable shift. Students talked, yes, but not about fashion or football. They talked about Marcus. About Austin. About the field. And most of all about what didn't happen. Marcus hadn't thrown punches. He hadn't turned into the violent stereotype the rumors had painted him as. Instead, he'd shown something they couldn't quite name at first. Something that felt bigger, wiser, stronger. In a school built on fear, Marcus had cracked the foundation by refusing to participate in its games. He wasn't trying to become king. That was what made him different. In homeroom, Marcus sat near the window as usual, his notebook open, though he hadn't written a word. A few students glanced over now and then, but not in the way they used to. It wasn't suspicion. It was something closer to curiosity, maybe even admiration. Then the unthinkable happened. Brian walked in late, muttering something about traffic, and instead of taking his usual seat near the front, he stopped by Marcus's desk. His hands were stuffed in his pockets. His voice was low. "You, surprised everyone, man," he said. Marcus looked up slowly. Brian shuffled his feet. "I didn't know you could fight like that." Marcus said nothing. Brian nodded awkwardly, then added, "Glad you didn't." "Not really. Like, thanks for not making it worse." He moved away quickly, clearly uncomfortable, but Marcus didn't chase the conversation. He just turned to his notebook and finally started writing. At the top of the page, "Control is the loudest form of power." Across the hallway, Austin sat in his usual seat. Alone. Zach and Luke hadn't shown up that morning. He stared blankly at the whiteboard, tapping his pen in a rhythm that had no pattern. When the teacher called on him, Austin didn't answer. For the first time, he wasn't trying to be noticed. He just wanted to disappear. Lunch came fast. Marcus entered the cafeteria with quiet steps, fully expecting the usual isolation. But instead he saw something odd, an empty seat at a full table, a group of juniors he didn't know very well waving him over. "Hey Marcus, you want to sit?" He hesitated, then nodded. As he approached, the noise in the cafeteria dimmed again. But this time there was no tension. Just curiosity. Anticipation. The silence that followed was not fear, but a kind of reverence. The students at the table didn't bombard Marcus with questions. They didn't grill him or beg for gossip. They just welcomed him like a peer. A quiet nod here. A respectful glance there. The conversation shifted quickly to regular topics. Homework, music, someone's weird gym teacher story, and Marcus listened. He even smiled once or twice. It was the most normal day he'd had since coming to Brooklyn High. And yet, across the room, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Austin sat alone. At the table he once dominated. He picked at his food, didn't speak to anyone, didn't even look around. The throne was gone. The court had vanished. And all he had left was silence. He caught Marcus's gaze once. They locked eyes for a second. And for the first time since Marcus had arrived, Austin looked away first. That night, Marcus told his father everything. James listened carefully, nodding now and then, his strong hands resting on the kitchen table. "I'm proud of you," he said at last. "Not for what you did out there, but for what you didn't do." Marcus looked down, thoughtful. "I was scared, Dad. Not of them, of me. Of losing control again." James nodded, his voice quiet. "That fear? Is what keeps you grounded. Don't ever be ashamed of it. It means you're aware. And awareness is how we grow. They sat in silence for a while after that, the ticking of the old kitchen clock filling the space like a heartbeat. Then James added, "You know what the most dangerous kind of fighter is?" Marcus shook his head. "The one who doesn't need to fight to prove anything." Marcus didn't respond right away. But the words sat with him. And they stayed with him into the next day and the next week as he navigated the shifting tides of Brooklyn High. Because now things were changing. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone. By the end of the week, Marcus Johnson wasn't just the new kid anymore. He was the guy who had faced down the untouchable and walked away untarnished. But what truly caught everyone off guard wasn't the quiet strength he showed on the field that day. It was what came after. He didn't boast. He didn't take over Austin's table. He didn't try to flip the social order on its head. He just stayed Marcus. Humble, steady, focused. That's what made people start to believe in him, not just as a fighter but as a leader. And it happened slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the way autumn seeps into the air before the leaves change. The whispers that used to follow Marcus in the halls were different now. Softer. Respectful. Words like "real one," "dude's solid," and even "he's not like the rest of us." But the biggest shift happened where no one could see it. Inside Austin Mitchell. Austin hadn't spoken to Marcus since the field. He hadn't spoken much at all. He walked the halls with a different energy now. Not slow and proud but quiet and careful. Students didn't part like waves when he walked by anymore. No one avoided his eyes, they just didn't look at him at all. It was like he had become a shadow of his former self. Brian and Cole still showed up at school but they no longer orbited Austin like planets around a sun. In fact, it was common now to see Brian chatting with other students, even Marcus on occasion, like nothing had ever happened. Cole. He stayed distant. And Zach, his older brother, the one who had stood behind every cruel move Austin had ever made, had stopped waiting for him at lunch entirely. It hurt. More than Austin could admit. But somewhere deep down he knew he deserved it. Friday afternoon, Marcus lingered after school. He found himself alone on the bleachers behind the football field, staring at the empty track. His fingers traced the edges of his father's old stopwatch, something he'd started carrying again, a habit from back in Chicago when he used to time his footwork drills. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. He didn't look up at first. But the voice that followed made him turn his head. "Hey." It was Austin. His hands were buried in the pockets of a gray hoodie, eyes tired but not hostile. "Didn't think I'd find you here," Austin said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You looking for me?" Austin shrugged. "Not exactly. Just wanted to talk." There was a long pause. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees behind the field. A flock of birds flew overhead, breaking the silence with the occasional caw. Marcus waited, not offering anything. Austin sighed. "I was wrong," he said finally. "About you." "About everything." Marcus turned to face him fully now. "I built everything here on fear. And it worked for a while. But you showed me something I wasn't ready for." Austin sat down a few rows away, careful not to get too close. "You embarrassed me. But not because you beat me. You embarrassed me because you didn't need to." Another pause. Then Austin looked up, his voice softer. "Why didn't you? You had every chance to take me down in front of the whole school." Marcus leaned back, his hands resting behind him on the bleacher. "Because I've been where you are. Angry. Cornered. Out of control." Austin looked away. Marcus continued. "But that version of me? It cost me everything. I made a choice this time. To be better. To walk away from the version of myself that wanted to hurt people." Austin swallowed hard. "And what if I want to walk away too? What if I don't want to be that guy anymore?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Then he stood, took a few slow steps down the bleachers and looked Austin straight in the eye. "Then start walking. But not away from your past. Through it." Austin looked up, the weight of the words sitting heavy in his chest. By Monday, something new was happening at Brooklyn High. Austin wasn't just silent anymore, he was different. He didn't bark orders at people. He stopped mocking others. He even joined group projects without demanding to be the leader. Some people thought it was an act. Others assumed he was waiting to strike again. But slowly, gradually, people began to believe that the change might be real. Not because Austin said so, but because he showed up every day and tried to be better. The first time he passed Marcus in the hallway after their talk, he nodded. Marcus nodded back. No words. None needed. And that, somehow, was louder than any fight. The weeks that followed became a quiet revolution. Brooklyn High wasn't transformed overnight, There were still whispers, still cliques, still the usual friction of adolescence, but the energy was undeniably different. You could feel it in the way students spoke to each other, in the way teachers no longer had to break up hallway scuffles, in the way Marcus walked through the school and nobody dared call him the fighter anymore. Because that wasn't what defined him. He wasn't the boy who fought. He was the boy who chose not to. And that, more than any punch thrown, had left its mark. Ms. Whitaker, the senior English teacher, was the first to comment on it aloud during class one morning. "Something's different this year," she said, arms crossed as she stood at the front of the room. "I've seen a lot of classes come and go, but this feels like the first time in a long while where people are actually listening to one another." Her eyes lingered briefly on Marcus, then flicked to Austin, who sat several rows away, quiet and focused on his notebook. "I don't know what happened outside these walls," she added, "but I hope you all hold on to it." The class stayed silent, but there was a certain mutual understanding. A shared awareness that something unspoken had shifted beneath their feet. Some students glanced at Marcus. Others at Austin. Neither of them looked up. But both of them were listening. After school that day, Austin stood at the edge of the track field again, where everything had changed for him. Marcus arrived a few minutes later, earbuds in, dressed in running shorts and a hoodie, warming up for his usual laps. "You run every day?" Austin asked as Marcus jogged past. Marcus slowed to a stop, pulling out one earbud. "Helps me clear my head." Austin looked down at his shoes. "Mind if I join?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded once. "Sure. Just don't fall behind." Austin gave a half smile. "No promises." They started jogging side by side, the rhythm of their footsteps slowly sinking. At first they didn't talk. The only sounds were their breaths and the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Then Austin broke the silence. "You know, people still think I'm faking it." "Some are always gonna think that," Marcus replied. "Doesn't matter. I want to fix what I broke," Austin said. "But I don't know how." Marcus didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You don't fix things by erasing the past. You fix them by choosing better now. Every day. Even when no one's watching." They ran a few more steps in silence. "I still feel the weight," Austin admitted. "So do I," Marcus said. "But I carry it differently now." Austin nodded, breath heavy. "I guess that's what you've been trying to show me." Marcus looked over. "I wasn't trying to show you anything. I was trying to show me." Austin understood. The track looped beneath them like a metaphor they didn't need to spell out. A cycle. A chance to keep going. To get better with every step. Elsewhere, Brooklyn High was changing in small but significant ways. Students who had once been easy targets began to speak up more. Class discussions grew richer. Teachers reported fewer incidents. And while no one ever said it outright, many attributed it to Marcus's influence. Not because he sought power, but because he modeled something far more lasting. Accountability. Restraint. Grace. Even the administration took note. Principal Reyes called Marcus into her office one afternoon, offering him a seat and a cup of lukewarm tea. "I want you to know," she said carefully, "that what you've done here, what you're doing, it matters." Marcus looked unsure. "I haven't done anything." "You showed us," she corrected gently, "that we've been getting it wrong. That discipline doesn't just mean punishing bad behavior, it means recognizing real leadership when it appears. Even if it doesn't look the way we expected." She slid a manila folder across the desk. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "A letter of recommendation. For college. Wherever you want to go." He opened it, scanned the words, and felt something shift in his chest. For the first time since arriving in Brooklyn, he felt seen. That night, Marcus sat again with his father on the fire escape. The city below pulsed with neon and noise. A car alarm wailed in the distance. Sirens hummed like background music. But above all of that was the quiet between them. James finally asked, "How's school?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Not perfect, but better." James nodded. "And Austin? He's trying. I think he means it." James leaned back. "Funny how people change when someone shows them how." Marcus looked over. "Did you ever think I'd end up teaching someone like him?" James chuckled. "Son, I didn't think you'd get through your first week without decking a kid. So, color me surprised." They both laughed. And in that shared joy was something deeper than relief. It was peace. Hard won. Long overdue. Deserved. Spring arrived gently at Brooklyn High. The trees lining the courtyard unfurled their leaves like cautious hands. Students gathered under the sun, tossing frisbees and cramming for finals. Birds sang from the rooftops, unaware they perched atop a place once ruled by fear. Inside those halls, life had moved on, but not in the way people expected. The hierarchy, once carved from intimidation and silence, had dissolved like fog under sunlight. It hadn't been replaced by chaos or anarchy. It had been replaced by something rarer: balance. And in the center of it all, Marcus Johnson continued to walk his steady path. He didn't wear a crown, didn't sit on a throne. But when he spoke, people listened. When he entered a room, people made space, not out of fear but respect. He wasn't the king of Brooklyn High. He was its anchor. On the last Friday before graduation, Principal Reyes stood on the auditorium stage, holding a microphone and a clipboard full of names. The auditorium lights buzzed overhead. Teachers lined the back wall, watching their students with the tender pride of survivors who had seen the worst and stayed anyway. Reyes cleared her throat. "Before we close the year, I'd like to recognize someone who didn't run for class president. Someone who didn't audition for lead roles or apply for awards. But who, by sheer presence, changed the heartbeat of this school." Students turned in their seats, glancing around, already guessing who it was. Reyes smiled. "Marcus Johnson, would you come up here?" There was a pause. Then thunderous applause. Marcus stood stunned. He wasn't expecting this. He hadn't prepared a speech. But the clapping didn't stop. He walked slowly down the aisle and climbed the steps. As he turned to face the crowd, hundreds of faces stared back. Some he'd stood up to, some he'd stood beside, all of them watching with something deeper than admiration: gratitude. Reyes handed him the mic. He held it awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Then, with a soft breath, he began. "I didn't come to Brooklyn High to be noticed. I came to survive." A quiet ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. But the truth is, sometimes surviving means standing still when everyone expects you to fall. Sometimes it means choosing silence over shouting, peace over pride. He paused. "I made mistakes before I came here. And I've been afraid of who I used to be. But I've learned that real strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how well you hold yourself together when everything around you tries to break you apart." He scanned the faces. Saw Austin sitting in the third row, head bowed, but listening. Really listening. Marcus finished, his voice firm. "I don't need to be remembered. I just hope I made this school feel a little safer for the next kid who walks through those gates alone." He handed the mic back and stepped down. The room stood. Not one person remained seated. After the ceremony, Austin found Marcus outside beneath a blooming dogwood tree. They hadn't spoken in weeks, not out of avoidance but because sometimes silence said enough. Austin held out a small black leather-bound notebook. Marcus looked at it, then back at him. "What's this?" Austin shrugged. "It's yours. Just some things I wrote down. Reflections, I guess." Marcus opened the first page. It was dated the day after the fight. The first line read, "Power isn't loud. It listens." He smiled and nodded, tucking the notebook into his backpack. "You're doing the work." Austin nodded. "Still got a lot to do." Marcus held out his hand. Austin took it. No cameras. No crowd. Just a quiet ending, and maybe a better beginning. That night, Marcus sat alone on the fire escape one last time before graduation. He opened the notebook Austin had given him and read through the pages. There were apologies. There were realizations. There were questions about how to be better, how to change without pretending the past never happened. Marcus closed the book gently. He looked up at the stars and whispered, not to anyone in particular, "I think we made it." From below, his father called up, "You coming in?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah. Just one more minute." He sat in the warm night air, the city humming below, Brooklyn High behind him, and the future unfolding ahead. He had walked into that school wanting to disappear. Instead, he became unforgettable. In a world that often teaches us to respond with force, Marcus Johnson showed us that true strength lies in restraint. That standing your ground doesn't mean throwing a punch. It means knowing when not to. In choosing self-control over revenge, dignity over dominance, Marcus didn't just survive Brooklyn High. He redefined it. The bravest thing you can do is be the better person when no one expects you to be. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength within us all, please like, comment your thoughts below and share this video with someone who needs it today. And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo for more stories that stay with you long after they end.